Welcome into the Stack Shack podcast. My name is Nathaniel. I am joined, as always, with my good buddy Gabe, and we have an awesome episode for you all today. So we're going to get straight into it. We ended last episode talking about how much we loved Arcane Act 1, and Arcane Act 2 came out, so we were very excited for it. Gabe, initial thoughts, impressions, what'd you think of Act 2?
Uh, I had a lot of expectations from Act 1, and I think Act 2 did a pretty good job of hitting all of them. That's overall pretty good.
Yeah. I think I would agree with that. For me, I think Act 2 was maybe not quite up to the same level that Act 1 was, but it was really darn close. Act 2 was fantastic. And like you said, there were such high expectations. I went into Act 1 having basically no expectations. And I came out of it absolutely loving the show. It's perfect. And then Act 2 is like, okay, I'm expecting perfection. And I think it almost got perfection. Like, it was very close to being perfect. And yeah, I just absolutely loved Act 2. What
It was pretty darn good.
Yeah, what stood out to you? You know, it's great. What specific moments stood out to you in Act 2?
Okay. I think the biggest thing for me is that it wasn't hitting the same plot beats I thought it was going to. Um, so like, okay. As much as I liked Act 1, there were some. This is a fairly standard plot tropes, right? Like we have,
Yeah.
sisters are gonna split apart. There's just gonna be. It was done very well. That's what I liked about it. And
Definitely.
then Act 2 gave me this, like, okay, I think it's gonna go in this direction. Like, I can't remember his name now. The Jace, the scientist guy.
Yeah.
I thought he was gonna have a different conflict than he went into. It just took it in a very different direction than I was expecting. I was expecting the sisters to have a very different reunion than we got. And all of these felt logical. Like, it works with the characters. It works with what they've established. And that's what hit me the most, I think, is that it subverted what I was expecting to happen, but still worked.
Yeah. It subverted your expectations, but didn't do things that felt completely out of place, which has been a complaint we've had of some shows where it's like, okay, you just threw that twist in there and it made no sense. And so that's an interesting point for me. I didn't know what to expect with Act 2. I knew there was going to be a time jump, right? And I think for me personally, the standout part for me was in any animated show, anime or just animated. I look for, okay, we've chosen to make this animated and generate this with computers, right? Instead of with actual actors and actresses. I want you to do things and take me to places that you wouldn't be able to take me to have it not be animated, if it wasn't animated, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, and I want scenes that just would never work as a real scene with real people in there. And I think there were a few, especially with Jinx's whole, like, almost schizophrenia, like her voice, the voices in her head and the memories and the flashbacks and that internal turmoil that's going on in Jinx. The way they displayed that on screen and the way they interpreted and implied those feelings on screen, I thought was absolutely incredible and something you wouldn't be able to do with actual actors and actresses. And that's what I look for in any animated show, and they just nailed it, in my opinion. Yeah. Those were my favorite scenes. Every time I was just like, oh, I loved that. That was so cool. That was so well done. I feel what the feeling and the emotion is conveyed in such a powerful way. And I think that was just incredible. I also want to give a shout out to the voice actors that are doing this. They are killing it. with the emotions and the delivery of the lines. It can be difficult as a voice actor to deliver lines when you're not also acting it. You know what I mean? You're not the person on screen. But they're able to embody, and it's combined with just such a beautiful animation style with everything feeling hand drawn and hand painted. I wanted to give a big shout out to the voice actors that are just doing a really, really good job.
Well, they're killing it. Especially, I want to say Jinx's voice actor
Mm-hmm.
just nails it.
Yeah. She snaps in between and really conveys that great emotion. And combined with what we were discussing as the visuals, I thought absolutely amazing.
Oh yeah. I also loved the whole hex tech subplot. This like Act 1, I was like, okay, this is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Act 2, oh, this is I'm getting into the political intrigue going on. Like,
Yes.
what's the ramifications of this happening now?
Yes.
Like, I thought it was a lot more interesting in Act 2.
I would agree with that. They expanded in Act 1. We really are just focused kind of on the sisters dynamic, and there's like this other thing going on that you're like, oh, that's kind of cool, and I liked it, but that wasn't a main focus of me. I wasn't super invested. I was just like, oh, that's kind of cool. But now seeing them start to weave a little bit, but also that political intrigue that you mentioned, really cool, and I feel like I'm invested now pretty deeply in both sides. And from what it looks like, we're going to get both sides colliding in our final act, which is just going to be incredible. I'm so excited.
I'm ready. I'm very ready. Now, do you think there's going to be another time jump? Or do you think they're just going to, like, not quite as drastic? Obviously, I don't think they're going to do another 3 years.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I could be wrong. Or do you think they're just going to pick up right off from episode 6?
I think it'll pick up pretty close. I think.
Okay.
That would be my guess. Because we've kind of already got our characters, I think, aged up enough for us to do the story, if that makes sense. You can't do this whole story with them as children. Specifically with Jinx as a child. And so I think we've aged them up to a point where Jinx is at a very specific point as far as her age is concerned, where it makes sense to do the story and where the story will, work. The other thing I would say is Act 1 had in my opinion, a pretty solid finality of that initial storyline. And it felt like it was just ready to go for a time jump. Whereas the way Act 2 ends, I feel like we still got to finish some things, if that makes sense, before we would be able to have another time jump. I don't think it makes sense to have a time jump here. Just from a finality perspective. But that's maybe my opinion. What do you think?
I agree with that. I think we're at a pretty good point. We might jump a few days, or
Yeah.
I wouldn't say a year. Like not close to that. Maybe a month at most.
That's true. There could be a little.
Since we saw, Vi was taken, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the last episode. So yeah, it could be like, oh, now Jinx is looking for it's been a few days or something like that. That's what I might expect.
Yeah, or a few days in the dungeon or whatever, and then meets a new character or whatever. Yeah, I'm so excited for Act 2. It's going to be incredible.
I'm ready.
We're 100% going to, or Act 3. I said Act 2. Act 3. We're definitely covering it on the podcast.
Oh yeah.
And I'm just thrilled to see a great new animation that I wasn't expecting, right? There's been a lot of shows that we've talked about that are on our most anticipated lists. One we'll probably talk about a little later in this episode, but this was pretty unexpected for me. It was like, oh, that looks kind of interesting. I know, everybody talks about League of Legends is a very popular game, and It's a Netflix original animation, so I know there's going to be some good time and effort put in. I heard the trailer was the studio that does all of League of Legends trailers was going to do the show, so they have some experience with the material. Okay, cool. Might be something I'm interested in. It's quickly becoming one of my favorite shows of the year. Or probably, honestly, at this point, it probably is my favorite show of the year. WandaVision might be close, but just really enjoying Arcane right now, and I can't wait. I hope we get a season 2. I hope this spawns a bunch more really high quality adaptations similar to this. I'd love to see that kind of content start coming out more. But yeah, very excited for our upcoming episodes.
I want your thoughts on this.
Mm-hmm.
You watched the Dota show.
I did.
Correct.
Yeah.
So both big MOBA games, right?
Yeah.
Like I would say probably the two biggest, if not.
Yeah.
Like
I would say the two
just
biggest.
Like in general, I don't think there's anyone that competes. Maybe the Pokemon one, but anyway, both have now had Netflix adaptations. I think we both kind of agreed that the Dota one wasn't very good.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
So, what do you think was the cause behind that? Why is the League of Legends Arcane doing so much better than the Dota one? Like they're both animated Netflix adaptations of a video game.
Yeah. So with the Dota one, and I'd encourage people listening to maybe go back and find our old episode if you can find it. It's a while back. But in general, I felt like the Dota one was maybe. So there's a couple differences, and let me start with the first one that just jumps out to me. Anime versus animated. And specifically taking an anime studio and being like, yo, do a Dota thing, versus taking the studio that has already made some banger trailers for League of Legends and has experience with the source material, do a League of Legends show. And I think that is a big part of it. Just having that studio that's familiar with the source material, familiar with the fan base, I think that helped. Okay. But I think more importantly, Dota tried to be very big, very globally scoped. It tried to do a lot. And I think it just didn't take its time, and it kind of rushed through things. And left me in a position where I watched the whole thing in one day, but it just felt like it was a little too short. It really was a little too short for the story they tried to tell. I didn't feel like I was able to develop the characters or get attached to any of them. And I think what they've done really well with Arcane is honing in on a much smaller story. Like, obviously, the League of Legends universe is very vast, and we could do a ton of different stuff. But they decided to focus in on a much smaller story without trying to bog us down with needing a bunch of backstory in the lore, if that makes sense. Dota was like, okay, cool, there's like these things, and they're trying to get these things, and they're not, and then this thing and that thing, and there's these different races and types of people and different species and blah, 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 blah. It just, you got lost, and you just didn't, by the end, you just didn't care about anything. And I think that's what Arcane did so well, especially in Act 1, is it made us all care about the characters. And it focused in on a much smaller group and a much smaller scale. It's just Piltover. It's just the Undercity and Piltover. That's it. We're not bringing in all the other worlds, right? those are there. You know, Piltover's making all this money by using the hex tech to bounce people around. But we don't need to see all of those other worlds to tell our story, and so we can stay a little more focused. And I think that's in my opinion the thing that's helped Arcane the most.
I would totally agree with that. I think the focus of Arcane on just making you care about these characters, and then because of how much you enjoy these characters, you start to enjoy the world more.
Yeah.
Rather than versa.
Yep.
So it'll just be interesting to see how streaming companies decide to adapt other games or novels for the future.
And Netflix seems to really be leading the charge.
Yes.
They are way out in front of everybody else right now.
It's interesting because I feel like Netflix has a very throw everything at the wall and see what sticks approach. Because I don't know, there hasn't been a ton of animated stuff from Netflix. I'm like, oh, this is really good. Like Arcane, Castlevania. The rest just kind of feel like, oh, we're just going to throw something out. It's just interesting to see what lands and what doesn't. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see, Castlevania, they turned into a lot more seasons than just that first season.
Yes.
And it'll be interesting to see if Arcane, I mean, Riot's got the money and it's being really successful now. It's got a fan base. I envision Netflix is going to go, yep, we're going to do this for a while. We're going to focus in on this. And I do get the sense that, like you said, just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. But what I think, and this has happened multiple times with different Netflix things, I think they like pick a kind of area that they want to try out, and they just start throwing stuff out, and then eventually one or two of them hit, and they go, okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to just do that. Right? You see it with like, they tried to do for a long time. They kind of tried the, like their first originals, they're like trying like all these gangster ones, right? And then Peaky Blinders hits, right? And then Narcos hits. And then they're like, okay, we don't need to try, and Ozark, maybe those are your three. They kind of got rid of everybody else. Like, there were some other shows in there that tried to do kind of the same thing, but then they're like, okay, those didn't work. We're going to focus on these three. Let's go. And I feel like that was kind of them with, they wanted to get into anime, and so they just started throwing stuff out. And then Castlevania hit, and they're like, ooh, sweet, we got one, okay. Try a bunch of other stuff like Castlevania, and it's like, okay, none of these are really working that well. Oh, but wait, I wonder if we tried other video games. And then they're like, okay, Dota, and Dota's like, okay. And then now Arcane hits, and I think they're just kind of throwing stuff out there, greenlighting a bunch of projects, and then honing in on the projects that do well for them. And that's just kind of the Netflix way. So I'm very excited to see, do we get more Arcane? Do we get maybe their separate League of Legends stories that they just do differently and they're not called Arcane every time, It'll be interesting. And the next part is, who's going to try and copy Netflix? Because that's the other thing that happens constantly in the TV series world. You have one show pop off, and then every other network tries to copy it, right? You have CSI, and then they're like, okay, now we're going to do 12 different CSIs.
Yes. Law and Order.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, one of them hits. Now every single channel has their crime scene investigation show, or their lawyer show or whatever, right? And that happens a lot in television. We had, what we can talk about later is we had Game of Thrones, right? And then there were like 30 more shows that came out that were all trying to kind of be Game of Thrones. like high budget, very
There's a lot
expansive
for more of
world,
those.
right? Um, and quite a few of them hit, but a lot of them don't. And it'll be interesting to see if anybody picks up. I think it pays to be the first to do it, right? And I think that's what Netflix has done with Arcane. It'll be
Do it
interesting to
well.
see if anybody picks it up afterwards, and tries their own shows. Maybe we'll get, well, just announced, this is not even something I was going to bring up, but we're getting a Halo show. So, they're trying that. I mean, it's not going to be animated. It's going to be actors and actresses, but, that's a
we got a
thing.
trailer for that too. That's like huge.
Yeah, it's coming out next
It's
year.
been so
like,
long.
Whoa. Okay.
We've been hearing about a Halo TV series, Halo movie, Halo TV series. Oh, it's canceled.
Yeah.
And then okay.
All right.
Great.
We're going 2022. See you then. So, I think it'll be interesting to see how Arcane shapes the landscape of both Netflix itself, but also the other networks out there that try to make their originals.
And also how the 3 episodes a week will. I'm wondering if they decided, like, let's test that with Arcane, or if they're like, we've put a lot of money into Arcane, let's leak it out a bit.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I'm interested in what their decision was behind that and how it will affect future content from them.
That is a good point. How will that 3 episodes a week? And it was interesting. I read an article just last week from, I think, one of the producers on the show or directors, one of the higher ups on the show was talking about how they thought 3 episodes a week would be a good fit because it would give them an opportunity to build a fan base. And I think that's exactly what we were talking about last week on the podcast when we were discussing the 3 episodes a week. And so, does Netflix start adopting that policy for some of their more higher profile shows? There are ones that they're just throwing at the wall. Maybe those stay as, one, all the episodes at once just to see if it catches on. And then maybe their higher budget ones, Witcher Season 2, future Arcane episodes, a Peaky Blinders season that's coming out. Maybe those they start dropping 3 episodes at a time, or some other subdivision of the number of episodes. Maybe if this is 9 episodes, maybe another show's 8 episodes, and so they drop 2 at a time. It'll be interesting to see.
Or, I mean, it could be that they decide, we want, like, Act 1 is 3 episodes, Act 2 is 4 episodes. Like, as long as they're breaking it up, I'm happy.
Yeah.
At least me personally.
Yeah, I would agree. I think they just need to give some sort of buffer in between the whole releases, and that's going to build your fan bases and make things more popular.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah. Well, switching gears here from similar to how we did last week, we talked Arcane, we talked The Harder They Fall.
Netflix
Talking Arcane again, and Netflix just keeps churning them out. Red Notice. Pretty big budget, right? We got 3 huge stars with Ryan Reynolds, Gal Gadot, and Dwayne Johnson. What did you think, Gabe? Just initial thoughts.
It was fun.
It was fun.
Okay. Let's say that. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminded me of a more toned down version of Hitman's Bodyguard.
Kind of that buddy cop dynamic.
Yes, yeah, buddy cops, like a heist film, a heist-ish thriller. Yeah, it was fun. We can get into further later, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, I mean, I think Red Notice is going to be, whether you like it or not, I think is going to be almost purely dependent on what your expectations are going in.
Yes.
And, why you're sitting down. And I think that's really important, and we've talked about it with marketing of shows and things in the past.
Set those expectations.
You need to set those expectations in the marketing, and that way, when I sit down to watch your show, I know what I'm getting into. Talk about a show or a movie like The Green Knight, If you went into that expecting a typical Arthurian mythological story, you're going to be very disappointed. Okay. But if you go into it expecting a very nuanced, a very complicated, a very artful interpretation of a very old poem, you might get a lot more out of it. And I think that's a similar case here with Red Notice. If you came in expecting a nuanced, interesting, surprising heist film, you're probably going to be disappointed. But if you came in wanting to see three very charismatic stars goof around for an hour and a half or for 2 hours with a background related to, an FBI agent and a couple of art thieves, and you expect action comedy and just, I'm going to sit down here and I'm going to eat my popcorn and laugh at dumb jokes and have a good time watching these three very charismatic individuals, then I think you're going to enjoy it.
Yes.
And so for me, I enjoyed it. I think I would agree with you. It was fun. It was like, okay, I came in going, this is going to be funny. This is going to be quirky. It's probably not going to be that good from a like cinematic and, dialogue. I mean, it's just going to be competent, I think.
Quips.
Is the best word. And I thought it was fun, it's got like 35% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's about what I would expect, but it's got 92% audience score. And I think this is a perfect example of where the critics just, can we have some fun? Like, critics, I totally get, ripping the shows and the movies that try and be too serious and just don't pull it off well, right? We can have our critiques of shows like Dune and shows like Malcolm and Marie that are supposed to be high-level cinema. Red Notice is supposed to be an action comedy. That's it. It's not supposed to be groundbreaking. We've seen a million of these. It's supposed to be, I'm tired, I want to relax and watch a movie. I'm going to just, Ryan Reynolds is in something. Let's turn it on, That's what this movie is about.
Exactly. Like, the whole, it's a perfect example to me. The, the very beginning, when Ryan Reynolds' character is escaping from the, I don't even remember what the art museum.
I can't remember the name of it either.
Was when he gets the egg at the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's trying to escape through the scaffolding, and the whole conflict is him just pulling things off the scaffolding and people falling down because of it.
Exactly.
No one thinks that's not going to happen at all. That's not what anyone would do. But is it funny? Is it entertaining? Yes.
Yes.
That's all we cared about.
Yeah. And the other thing that I thought they did at the beginning, that I wish they would have continued, Netflix, for me, they always come up with some really interesting camera angles and perspectives that normally I don't expect. And they did some really cool things with the chase scene with the camera angles where I was like, oh, that was cool. That was fun. It's not groundbreaking stuff. I knew what was going to happen. I saw pretty much every twist and turn coming, but I was still laughing and having a good time and smiling by the end of it,
Exactly. Like, there's art for the sake of let's advance the field, and then there's art for the sake of let's just make something enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly. And, you look at, and this is where I get with a lot of these movies that are just supposed to be fun, and then the critics bomb them, and you're like, come on. Like, you look at, for example, Kong Godzilla, right?
Yes.
It's not groundbreaking. I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm not surprised.
Big monkey punch big lizard.
Exactly.
That's all we want.
That's all I want. And then you see critics are like, well, the character design of the, humans, they just didn't feel attached to them. I'm like, I don't expect to be. I just want to watch Godzilla get punched by Kong and vice versa. That's all I'm going. You got to set expectations, and I wish more reviewers would like start every review with what did I expect going into this show, you know? If you expect it's not going to be The Godfather. It's not. Come on. Like, not every movie's trying to do that. It's just supposed to be a good time, and I felt like Red Notice was a good time. I appreciated also that it was PG-13.
Yes.
We didn't have to throw a bunch of gratuitous sex scenes or horribly crude humor and a bunch of language in. We could just have a good, fun time and not have to add a bunch of extra crap in to make it edgy, right? It was just, let's have a good time. I thought Gal Gadot was particularly awesome. I think it's a role that we haven't really seen her in, you know?
She's rarely the villain.
Yeah, I guess she's rarely a villain.
I don't know if you call her the villain in this film.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. She was fun. She was a really cool villain, and I'm putting that in air quotes because
antagonist. Let's go with that.
Yeah, an antagonist of some kind, sort of a protagonist as well. She was awesome. I thought she was great. Yeah. I think the one complaint I would have is I did feel like the Ryan Reynolds quippy, funny dialogue thing is starting to get a little played out. Okay. Like, I feel like he's having the same lines in all of his movies. And I don't think
he's just playing himself now.
Yeah, exactly. I don't find that to be, necessarily, that's not really his fault. That's the writer's fault. I don't know how much he's involved in the writing process, so maybe it is partially his fault. But I just feel like, Hitman's Deadpool, Hitman's Bodyguard, Free Guy, Red Notice, every interview he does, it's starting to feel a little played out. And like, you're playing yourself now. It's not another character, right? In Deadpool, he was playing Deadpool, right? And Deadpool has all of those quips, and that made perfect sense. Hitman's Bodyguard is supposed to be just this outrageous thing. That made a little more sense. But I'm starting to just see a pattern with his movies. Even like Six Underground, which is a little while ago, it's just starting to be the same dialogue every time. And I don't think, I think Ryan is perfectly capable as an actor of delivering funny lines in a different way. I would love to see more
him in a different role,
more nuance to his roles. In the writing, Free Guy, I think, is a very, unique perspective. I thought this show was fine. I thought, they're different characters, but they all end up having the exact same personality and almost the exact same dialogue. And I would like to see some iteration on that. Like, let's let Ryan break out of a little bit of the typecast here.
I would agree. I think it is getting a little old to an extent. Mm-hmm. It's still enjoyable. He's a funny guy. Every I see, I'll crack a smile. I'll snicker at a lot of the jokes he makes. Mm-hmm. But it's just predictable.
Yeah.
And I think he is a much more capable actor than a lot of the roles he's being given to add more nuance to what he's doing.
Yeah.
I would love to see him. I don't even know what role I'd want to see him in, but I would just be interested in seeing what would happen if he was in a more serious or maybe I don't know. I just don't want quippy anymore.
Yeah. Can we get Ryan something else to do?
The most dry sense of humor Ryan possible.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
He could stay comedy, just not quippy.
And it, again, totally fine if they keep him that way. It just won't be to my taste as much anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just starting to get a little played out, and I'm always going to be like, well, he did it better in Deadpool, or he did it better in Free Guy, or he did it, it's starting to be like, well, okay, if I want quippy, funny Ryan Reynolds, there's like 8 other movies I could watch. Why do I need to watch this one? Why does he do anything spectacular in this one? And I felt like him and Samuel L. Jackson in the first Hitman's Bodyguard is perfect. You know, him and Dwayne Johnson was pretty good, but I felt like Dwayne Johnson and oh my gosh, Hobbs and Shaw. Who's Shaw's actor?
Oh, oh no.
Crap.
Oh,
Brain. Somebody. I can't remember. Why can't I picture him?
I don't know.
I'm looking it up. There it is. Jason Statham. Thank you, Brain. Goodness gracious. I'm glad I have Google. I'm glad I do this on a computer and have Google. Jason Statham, I thought him and The Rock were better in the Fast and Furious franchise. I thought they were better than Ryan Reynolds and The Rock here. And I thought Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson were better in the first Hitman's Bodyguard than Ryan Reynolds and The Rock were here. So it's starting to feel like, okay, I kind of seen this before. You know,
like,
and
it's okay to just throw a new dynamic at us, but I want it a little more different than this dynamic was.
And that's why I think I liked Gal Gadot so much, was because it was something new and fresh. I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. Yes. This is a fun role for her. She seemed to really enjoy playing the role. So, you know, I think that's kind of where my thoughts begin and end on the show. Is it was a lot of fun, and it didn't do anything spectacular, but if you're looking for a fun action movie, especially with it being PG-13, you know, some of your kids can probably join in. Sit down and watch Red Notice. Have a good time. But don't expect anything groundbreaking. And moving forward, can we please cast some of these actors in somewhat different roles? Although Gal Gadot can keep repeating this role for a little while. I'm fine with that.
I will not get tired for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed it. I'm also looking forward to enjoying Wheel of Time this weekend.
Ooh.
Although sounding like I might not enjoy it quite as much as I would hope.
Yeah.
But we'll have to find out for ourselves.
We will. And I think, so what I'm having to do with Wheel of Time for me personally, and just to remind the audience, Wheel of Time has been one of our most hyped shows of 2021. We're both very, very, very excited for it. Gabe has read all of the books. I just recently started. I'm like halfway, well, not even halfway. I'm like a third of the way through book 2 right now. Because I figured book 1 would be season 1, right? Well, I think Wheel of Time is going to be, the TV show is going to be very important to set some expectations going in. Especially for longtime fans of the books. I think there's a few things that I'm having to remind myself. Like I finished book 1, was like, this is going to be sick. I cannot wait. And there were some moments in the trailers that alluded to different parts of book 1 that I thought looked pretty good and was pretty excited for. But I think we're going to have to set some expectations. I'm having to alter my expectations a little bit. And one, I'm having to remind myself this is going to be an adaptation. And this is something all of you book fans out there have to remember whenever your book gets turned into a movie or a TV show. It is an adaptation. It's going to be different than the books. If you like the way the books are and think that's perfect, then go read the books. That's what they're there for, right? You'll still have your perfect version.
Yes,
they're going to change things.
Every time you change medium, there's going to have to be a difference. Like, you can't portray what you saw in the book exactly as you would see on film.
Yeah.
There's going to be a difference no matter what.
And you know what? You can't plan on 14 seasons. I'm sorry.
Nope.
You're not going to get 14. Even the most successful shows of all time don't go for that many seasons. Game of Thrones, 8 seasons. Clone Wars, 7. Right? Everybody take a deep breath and realize you're not going to get 14 seasons, which means they're going to have to skip stuff. They're going to have to get to the meat and potatoes of the story in a different way. They're going to change things. They're going to probably hopefully they're going to keep the same themes, and maybe they'll do a good job. Maybe they'll do a terrible job. We don't know, okay? I think that's the first thing I'm having to remind myself, is this is an adaptation. I need to go in expecting things different. And spoiler alert, there's a lot that's going to be different. We've got new characters that don't exist in the book. We've got characters that are in the book that are not going to be shown in the TV show. They're not even going to exist. We've got a little change to the possibility of who's going to be the dragon. I don't think they'll change actually who ends up being the dragon. That wouldn't make sense. That would get really... I mean, that just basically changes the whole story entirely. But
that changes a lot.
They've changed... They've already changed the perspective of the show. They've already added a couple of characters. Like, guess what? Perrin's married. Woo! Guess what? Matt has kids. What? Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard anything about the episode, the premiere yet. So
yeah. So
this is news to me.
I'm just throwing it out there. Sorry if those are spoilers to you. Spoiler warning for all of the episodes we do on Wheel of Time, but Perrin's married. Matt has kids. Moraine's our perspective on the whole thing. Egwene is included as one of the Edmund's Field crew that could be the dragon. Again, I don't think they're going to change who the dragon ends up being, and I won't spoil who that is, but in the books, it's limited to just the men.
I don't think that's a huge... Well, that is kind of a... Oh, okay.
It could have some... Yeah, let's not get into spoilers too much, but it could have some major implications down the line, okay?
Yes.
The other thing is...
Heavy implications.
If you were expecting TV-14, you're not going to get it. If you were hoping for TV-14, you're not going to get it. It's going to be TVMA. They've aged up the characters. They've now made one of them married, so I can only imagine that we'll probably get a sex scene, which doesn't happen in the first book.
Shock.
Doesn't come as a huge shock if you've been following it, but if you're just getting into this, get ready for a different show than maybe what you imagined in your brain. I have been hearing very mixed opinions on it. It seems like... So, nobody's seen the whole first season. Some reviewers saw the first 3 episodes, which are all dropping this weekend. Or, actually, by the time you see this, they just dropped. The first 3 episodes will have just dropped by the time you see this. Okay? And then they're going to drop one a week following, which I think is an interesting release schedule, which we can talk about maybe later. But some reviewers have seen the first 3 episodes only. Some have seen the first 6. Nobody has seen all 9. That is allowed to talk about it. Maybe they have, and they just can't talk about it. I don't know. A couple of the people that only saw the first 3 seem to be maybe a little bit more positive than the people that saw the first 6, which I think is telling.
Just a little.
I've got some... So, that's my first expectation. The other expectation that I'm trying to set, which is the part that I think I'm actually most concerned about, besides the changing of the story. I mean, obviously the changing of the story is concerning because you're like, well, I don't know what's going to happen. Let's see. The aging up bothers me a little bit as well. Although I've heard mixed opinions on how heavy they went gore and sex. Like, some people are like, no, it's nothing like Game of Thrones. And other people are like, I think they tried way too hard to be Game of Thrones and added extra stuff in there that didn't need to be. So I'm going to watch it for myself, and you'll hear next week on the podcast what I thought. But my other big concern, I am not super convinced that the animation and set pieces look right.
It looked a little off to me in trailers, so...
Yeah, certain parts seemed like they were nailed. But, like, our first trailer, where we didn't see a Trolloc up close, looked alright. But then I saw some of the combat with the Trolloc in another trailer, and I went, ooh, that looks very CGI, reminiscent of the Battle of Five Armies, where it just doesn't look right. Like, it looks way over CGI'd. And I'm like, that concerns me. The other thing is, I'm not sold on how the magic is going to look. And you may say, oh, it's magic, right? But Wheel of Time has a very interesting and intricate magic system. And I'm concerned it's going to end up looking very, like, hand-wavy.
Yes.
With kind of bad CGI. Like wisps around them. And that concerns me. Now, maybe they're going to nail it. But just from the trailers, specifically the Trollocs, did not... Like, they looked right from far away, but then when I saw them, like, move and there was, like, the combat in one of the trailers, I got very concerned. And if that's a foreshadowing of things to come with a fantasy show, I really think the CGI of the creatures, you have to nail it. I think that's what Lord of the Rings did. Nazgul are sick, right? And also, I think the orcs were very well done. The trolls look right. All that stuff just feels like it works. The goblins are good. The creatures of the world are well done, I feel like. I think that's another thing. Game of Thrones, everybody will talk about their design for the dragons. The dragons are sick. They're sick from the very beginning. Even when they're little babies, you're like, I just want to see more dragons. That's cool, right? That gets crazier towards the end.
In general.
Yeah, but they did a really, really good job with animating those dragons, and I think that sold there's a bunch of people, I know for me, watching the first couple seasons, I'm like, I just want more dragons, show me more dragons, this is sick. I'm just gonna I could care less what happens to anything, I just want to see more dragons, because they're so cool. It brings people in, and if your animation feels cheesy in a fantasy, I think we get into a problem.
Yes. Because part of fantasy is just having that fantastical world that you can get immersed in, and like, I wish this was in the real world, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If it doesn't look right, it's just not going to get that same sense of wonder or sense of horror, depending on what you're going for.
Yeah, and it breaks your immersion. You're like, oh, that didn't look right. That didn't feel right. That person didn't move the way they should have. So yeah. The other thing I don't even know if I'm not gonna say this. There's a character that I found out they're gonna leave out and not even include at all, and I'm pissed. But
Oh no! Oh
when we
please!
get to that
You have to tell
part,
me afterwards.
yeah, I'll tell you, Gabe, after the podcast. But when we get to the end of, when we get to that point in the story, or when I get to a point where I've seen enough that it would have made sense for that character to have shown up already, we'll talk about it on the podcast, and I'll explain why I'm so pissed off. The other thing I wanted to just, for all you fans out there, I'm just going to throw this one out there too. This first season takes parts of 3 different books. It's not the first book only. It's not the first and the second. It's the first and the second and the third and the prequel. So 4 books. Now,
Oh. Okay.
they're taking pieces from them. And it is going to come, I think it's really just going to come down to, do they take the right pieces and does it make sense? Or do they just completely botch the whole entire continuity? From hearing from the director, the person who oversaw it, he's a lifelong fan of Wheel of Time, read them as they came out. So I would hope he's got a good grasp of keeping the continuity. But, we'll see. And
yeah,
by now we have seen it. So, hey out there watching, let us know in the comments what you thought. And, we'll be here next week to talk about it. Any final thoughts, Gabe?
I'm a lot more hesitant about the show, but excited to see what's going to happen.
Yep, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to watch all 3 episodes, and we're going to find out. And if it's good, we're going to talk about how great it is. If it's bad, we're going to rip it to pieces. Should be a good time either way.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, see ya.